After some padding, Sonic notices Knuckles had been pinned down by a big stone column, and conveniently, he's now nice enough to want to free the guy who tried to kill him when he's got no way of knowing what he wanted the emerald for. And he assumed that he wanted to take over the universe with it earlier, and he was fine with stealing from a bunch of people in the first movie off screen. Good thing he got character development from Tom. After a bunch of padding where Knuckles somehow gives up trying to save himself, which is really not new either. This is just like an STC where he lost the Chaos Emeralds and wanted to let himself die because he was a failure of a Guardian. He gets submerged and has to be motivated into pushing the column with Sonic until he could wriggle free and swim to the surface. Why didn't Sonic get given swimming lessons before this? Well, Tom didn't know he'd need them, and it was worth it because eventually it gives us the moment where Knuckles pulls him out of the water for saving him earlier. It's night by now, and after some pointless narration, they grab onto some rotten driftwood from underwater, and Knuckles asks him why he saved him as he swims towards the island's tip. He should have known Eggman was lying about him being a menace as soon as he stole the emerald. Knuckles says he's been trying to destroy him, and the use of the word destroy takes me out of it. That's not what he would say. He wasn't firing blasts of energy. He was fighting him with physical force. The story's dark enough that there's no point in the never say die rule. Sonic says he couldn't let him die, so they're allowed to say die, but not kill for some reason. Knuckles is still confused, and somehow says that Sonic wishes to destroy him too, despite this. He wouldn't say wish instead of want. Normally it's great that he talks so seriously and formally, because that's Adventure 2 Knuckles. The most respectful portrayal. They clearly did their research on what most of the fans would want Tails and Knuckles to be like before writing the movie. But they went too far in this direction by having him always talk formally when he's still just a teenager who's got no education. Sonic's confused and gets told he was always lied to that the owls were murderous and that the fate of the world depended on stopping them. And when the day came to fight them, his father stopped him from joining the fight because he was too young. After some pointless dialogue where Sonic judges him, eventually Knuckles says Sonic's people are killers, even though Sonic's clearly not an owl. It's great that movie Sonic screams, slipping off the wood a little. Knuckles realizes he was wrong, and the narration lampshades how long it took. After padding, Knuckles says his whole life has been a lie, but it's cathartic at this point. Sonic disagrees with him and says he's always been training to do the right thing, but just didn't know what that was. After padding, he says they're in the same boat, and Knuckles assumes he gave him brain damage and finally chuckles because he takes him literally. After some boring padding full of dialogue because Sonic's too selfish to stop talking when told to, eventually they see Tails' biplane above them they didn't have earlier. I'm thinking of the Tails' theme from Sonic Adventure right now. This is a perfect introduction for Tails to Knuckles. He also didn't have his aviator goggles and a long scarf from the OVA earlier either. I hope the movie explains this because the novel doesn't. He waves a hand as he circles close to them, and eventually a banner from the ruined wedding drops to let them climb aboard. I hope they explain how in the world he got a plane. After pointless narration, Eggman says Chaos is power to hear the echo in the sky that he wanted to make. So I guess that's new. But it gets boring when it gets back to pointless narration that expects me not to already know what it tells me. Eventually he flies over to Western America with a vengeance for no reason against the whole place. Eggman flying isn't new either. See Super Robotnik and the episode where he literally went super? Why would there be dopey little mud huts in Western America? I guess it's metaphorical to describe how primitive most tech is compared to his, but I already knew he knew that. He calls every bit of tech to him, even the smallest circuits and spark plugs. It makes sense that Eggman would specialize in techno magic as soon as he got power. It's also common sense for him to try to use magic in the first place. It makes it obvious how wrong Archie was when it had him look down on magic. There's pointless padding, and when Wade tells Tom where Eggman's secret lair is, eventually he's told not to go in there and to not move. And Wade doesn't hear the words "do not," which is eventually explained as Eggman's interference. It doesn't explain that he also didn't hear the words "don't move" right before that. But there's no reason Eggman wouldn't have kept them from hearing those words as well. Wade doesn't know how powerful Eggman got, but he still knows he's got drones and all he has is a gun. So it's still impossibly dumb that he decided to go in. Even if a character is supposed to be an idiot, there's nothing good about writing that. After some padding where there's a bunch of narration reflecting how confident Eggman is, and Walter's telling Guns to get every piece of hardware here, somehow Agent Stone asks Eggman if he's feeling okay when he glides to the ground. Eggman lampshades this by repeating okay to him. Or he could have not written it. Of course he's more than okay, what an idiot. Eggman swivels his head units to the right 45 degrees and behind his inferior. The words unit and exactly weren't needed. But this is something new, and the main villain is supposed to be creepy. Eggman says he's upgraded and taken his game to the next level. Exactly. And if this was Flynn Eggman, he never would have gotten to this point because he'd be too dumb to know this somehow. He would have had a robot take the emerald and go super. After padding, he converts into energy and then warps behind Stone like a bit of binary code flickering 1 to 0 and back. I like the comparison between magic and coding. It's smarter of Eggman to focus on the similarities between science and magic and appreciate them. He says check, being entertaining as he undoes Stone's handcuffs without touching them. It took 80 pages, but he's finally especially good in this story. He can smell the electricity in his brain, even though it's got no smell, and thinks it'd be a nutritious meal in his new form. He says Wade smells like a snack plate, and at a time like this, he says it's his mom's specialty, which makes sense if he's joking to cope with this. Like Sonic. I read on TV tropes and in the actual movie, when Knuckles got submerged, Sonic was like, "Water again?" And it deflated the tension, so I'm glad the novel didn't do that. And this is the same problem, but it fits better with someone who's supposed to be stupid. Eventually Stone says in front of a screen they've got a problem, even though his boss is omnipotent. Just like Starline, he doesn't have enough faith in someone he's idolized for years because he's not as optimistic. Eventually Eggman raises the shutters of the cafe windows to reveal a sight Stone's thankfully cowering from. Commandos that are head to toe in bulletproof armor with blasters backed by tanks and choppers and cannons. It took too long describing that. He's got a good point cowering from them because logically they would have just instantly fired. And Walter's gonna get them all killed because he sent them here. Because they're too stupid to just instantly fire at him. Eggman blows through the window, but eventually it's explained that they weren't the ones who wanted to kill first. How convenient for a kids' movie. He threatened to kill Tom when he first met him, but no, he's Sonic first. There's some padding after this, with Tom leaving a stealth jet and insulting Eggman for forgetting his nickname and taunting someone with omnipotence. Somehow Walters thinks Eggman's finished as well because they've taken his lab, when he should know he's omnipotent by now. So eventually Eggman reaches out his fingertips and shoots energy, which eventually destroys a tank. The soldiers inside fall as its pieces swirl around him like electrons. It didn't need to say perfectly balanced electrons, but the atom shape fits Eggman. If I ever called Walters by the wrong name and he's actually Walter, it just goes to show you how forgettable his name is. Walters says, "My God," realistically. And Eggman says he's right, he is his god. That was a great line of his. It was hammy and fit how respectful this is of him. It's confusing in universe that God wasn't capitalized on a realistic Earth. In universe, either Walters is a polytheist or most people are. And ancient aliens using rings to travel there could have caused a polytheistic religion based on them to be more common. It's brave of Walters to say open fire, but it was too late. The soldiers' guns come apart in their hands, and the components float over to Eggman. It didn't need to say they were made of metal. I hope by too late it means he was already in the process of having this start to happen, like a smart person would. The spear of technology around him creates a giant mecha around him with boots. So much for creativity. And eventually tells Stone that if he wants to live through the impending recreation of existence, he has to load up his playlist into his mech's earpiece. And he says he's vibing, which is lame. Why doesn't he just recreate it right now, in a single thought? It has to be because he's sadistic, so he wants to see the reactions of these people while he's doing it in real time. And he's too distracted looking at them and thinking about what it'll do to them to think about warping Sonic and Tails to him. And if he's omnipotent, Then why doesn't he do it? I guess he's just that lazy. There's a bunch of pointless narration as the biplane goes through the sky. After all the time he's been bullied, it's realistic that Tails doesn't trust Knuckles yet. After all, he still doesn't know what he wanted the emeralds for. I'm glad Knuckles heard Sonic call him confused and get offended, but still didn't do anything wrong. There's more padding until Sonic tries to come up with a plan when that should be Tails. And before he could tell Knuckles what to do, he jumped at the giant robot. It's trying to be funny, but what else would he have told Knuckles to do? He talks like he had another plan, but Knuckles can't fly a plane. Sonic states the obvious, but at least he calls Tails buddy. He asks a stupid question, and Tails is in character saying that if he's gonna go out, he wants it to be with him. Thankfully, Sonic tells him not to get ahead of himself. Eventually, the plane dodges some missiles. Sonic states the obvious, and it says he's doing a mad, heroic laugh. How can there be a heroic laugh? Tails says he nods while laughing along because he found it infectious, showing good chemistry with him again. Can't help but be a little confused that Tails being optimistic and fearless. He shouldn't be a coward either. After padding, some shrapnel shoots out from the giant mecha that should be called that, and knocks Sonic off the wing. Clear off was redundant there. Tails turns the plane towards the mecha and eventually fires lasers at the head until the other wing gets sliced through and he flies out of it, which makes him smarter than the pilot of Sonic Boom. There's a lot of padding after this. I like that Eggman's middle name is Gerald, but the heroes aren't doing anything interesting. Knuckles gets kicked several blocks away. He lands in the middle of a football field with a bunch of dirt bursting into the sky. And I like that Eggman says he's good like a football player. Eventually Sonic makes sure a missile hits the robot, but after his annoying bragging, the robot fixes itself immediately. I keep calling it Robot instead of Mecha like it actually is, because it says Giant Eggman Robot. Like it's Sonic Boom where he called it Giant Robot. Like at least try to come up with a name. Eventually it turns out Knuckles is still capable of fighting after this, magically. Eggman distracts himself scaring people with drones so Sonic can try to come up with a plan. Whatever happened to Sonic first? Tails wishes there was a weak spot, and Knuckles says I suggest the groin, which would normally be smart and respectable of Knuckles. If he was all honor before reason, he would be like, no, that's dumb. But Eggman wants to make one part of the mecha weak. Sonic doesn't say this for no reason and just wastes time. So Knuckles doesn't get it. And Sonic finally tells him to stop saying groin. Yeah, exactly. He spies out on the street and sees Eggman's mecha looking for him. It never did explain what it looked like. I assume spied out means that Eggman's down the wrong street, so that's why he doesn't interrupt Sonic's planning. Eventually Eggman calls out for Sonic for a while, which has Sonic figure out he's his weak spot. He says he's the groin, make him a hypocrite for insulting Knuckles. He eventually says he could keep Eggman focused on him so he'd be left open for an attack from the two of them. Somehow Tails doubts his plan despite looking at his gizmos, which are only figuratively called endless supply. Eventually, Knuckles calls him noble and brave. He's fighting Eggman to prevent his life from not being the same anymore. It isn't necessarily noble. He tells him to go to certain death with honor, and Sonic says they're gonna have to work on his pep talks, which tries to be a memorable exchange. Eventually Sonic gets Eggman's attention and runs through the legs of the mecha, which I have to assume means he ran between them. Why write like he literally tore through it by running? Eventually it says to his right, Knuckles runs in a red blur, tearing chunks out of the street for some reason, causing collateral damage like a villain. And to his left, an orange blur flies around, destroying the remaining drones. So the plan gets carried out just like you'd expect, with boring narration and dialogue dragging it out agonizingly. Eggman was being a lot more entertaining before he made a mecha for himself, doing all sorts of things he never did before. And now it's just generic final boss fight 3,000,000,001. His mecha shooting missiles reminds me of a Sonic Rush boss, and there's nothing here to care about. There's so much padding, it even repeats Eggman's threat to Sonic as he's about to crush him with the boot of the mecha. Relatably, Tails can't help but close his eyes at the sight. and after a few pointless sentences, Knuckles punches the mecha on its head. There's more padding after this, well it goes just like you'd expect. Eventually, Eggman says he hates that hedgehog like an AOSCH, and Knuckles says he just hates the holograms of those three heroes. The narration explains what was already obvious, like it expects readers to be stupid, before Knuckles punches his way into the cockpit, because Eggman was too stupid to make him invincible with his omnipotence, and eventually hits the Doctor himself. It's lying when it says as hard as he could. He wouldn't have survived that if that was the case. Eventually it says the punch makes waves of green chaos energy. Sure, the chaos part is redundant right now, but everyone in the fanbase likes when it's being said. Eventually it turns out the punch had removed Master Emerald from his body. This is so much better than an IDW, because it knows how strong Knuckles is. If this was IDW, we'd have to punch the Emerald a lot to get it out. It's too bad the concept of the Master Emerald being inside a person who's powered up with it was already used for Metal Sonic and IDW. But seriously, why didn't Eggman just summon an invincible mecha instead of attracting metal that was already around to make the mecha? I read on TV Tropes that there's a fan theory about this. The power of the Chaos Emerald is enriched by the heart, so because he's heartless, he was weaker with the omnipotence. I get to read about Eggman saying no a bunch. Without the emerald, the mecha goes limp. He says auxiliary power and that works. He was smarter than I thought. Though he should have needed to say computer first just in case he wouldn't get to. So eventually Knuckles gets tossed aside, and the mecha starts digging in the ground for its lost power source. Surprisingly, it's revealed that Sonic really had gotten pinned by the mecha's boot, and he's told to look out, and coming up the road in a pickup were Tom and Maddie. Eventually when he picks it up, it shatters and its power goes dead. I thought the emeralds had infinite power. This is stupid. Eggman sets fire to trees in a big circle around Sonic. Tails couldn't reach him. Why wouldn't he be able to fly over the fire and then carry him to safety? It should have been explained the flames were just that high up that he wouldn't be able to fly over them in time. Why doesn't Sonic just run in a circle to extinguish the fire? Well, he isn't as smart and experienced as SCC Sonic. It says no one could reach him. And after padding, Maddie and Tom do reach him. It says they ran through the fire like morons just to comfort him, when Eggman's clearly planning to crush him. If there was a small enough amount of fire for them to do that with no consequences, then why didn't Sonic run out of the fire circle? And according to the book, they both said the same thing to Sonic in stereo as if they rehearsed it. They all hug instead of getting Sonic out of there, and the emerald sparkles beneath them just as Eggman brings the foot of the mecha down and makes a noise. After the fake-out death scene wastes some time, light shines out from under the mecha's foot so bright the Tails had to shield its eyes as its leg gets lifted and cast aside by Supersonic, while Tom and Maddie aren't hurt. The nicest I can be to these morons is to assume they knew this would only happen if they went to Sonic, and they could either take the risk or get killed or subjugated by Eggman. But that was a dumb risk when it looked like the emerald was broken. After some padding, Supersonic's voice shakes the trees menacingly because it's trying too hard to show you he's more powerful, as if the new look in super strength was too subtle. So I don't like that, because he's supposed to be a hero. Why is Sonic talking to him instead of instantly going to fight the mecha? Because of this, Eggman has the time to waste even more time. Eggman smartly flatters him and says let's give up on the fight while being scared of Supersonic despite being behind a mecha. But this makes sense in context, because Sonic's powered up with something that let him do whatever he wanted this time. And this is the first time he's seen him use that power, which he knows firsthand how amazing it is. So he doesn't know if he can trust them not to kill him with it yet. He then screams a threat and tries to use the mecha to punch Sonic, which just telegraphs the blow, so of course it gets dodged. He might have hit him if he made it punch him while he was talking. Eggman keeps missing, which is all that was needed to describe that. In a bunch of flying attacks, Sonic wraps the mech in a web of hot chaos energy. The laser hot power was unnecessary. Eventually the mech gets destroyed, collapsed into a pile of rubble. I guess Eggman's being pinned down by it since he talks weakly and passes out. I feel like people overstated how cruel, quote-unquote, Sonic was. I think they were just too used to IDW. He's being exactly as harsh with him as he is in the games. It's not like he literally tries to finish him off. Sonic lands next to Maddie and Tom, and Tails lands next to Knuckles, who pats things out, assuming that Sonic's gone evil, when there was no indication in the film that the power forces that on people. Because the Emerald didn't absorb all of the world's evil. If he really thinks this, why isn't he running away? Because if he was really evil, he would be fighting them instead of letting them talk. Sonic puts a hand under his armpit to make a loud noise in a childish joke he laughs at, and Knuckles takes back what he said. Without Sonic thinking of making Eggman good first, he reaches his hands into the fur of his chest, and eventually lifts his hands and blasts the Chaos Emeralds far away really fast. And I just have to assume it's because no one should have this kind of power. After some padding, he explains that blue is more his color. I read that in the movie, he also summoned a chili dog, which showed that he really could do anything. And Maddie and Tom hug him again, with them finally over refusing it like an immature kid with an ego. Tails shows him that he's smarter than him by being confused that he gave up being the most powerful hero. Thankfully, he doesn't completely rain on his parade by saying, you could have just cured cancer, or a whole bunch of other stuff, like the Rick and Morty franchise lampshaded with this kind of thing in the comic. Sonic tells him with a smile that's because he's not done being a kid yet. He wants to have some semblance of a normal childhood first. And because he's cocky, he assumes he won't need that power to beat Eggman if he fights him again. And he didn't make sure he wouldn't be able to, so Tails was right to be concerned. I prefer how he says the line here to how he says it in the movie. It's so polite of Tails to not argue with him about this. Eventually Knuckles whines that the Emerald's worthless now, and gets given a big speech about exposition he already knows that lectures their ancestors on fighting. He says he earned the power of it morally because they worked together. He gathers the fragments of the shattered emerald and squeezes them together in his hands, and says now the 7 have returned, and he'll make sure their power is under control. Even though not even a page ago it said he sent the Chaos Emeralds away, and it said they blasted through space and time itself, gone forever. Why did they return? They don't do that after they scatter. I have to assume it's because they have been fused with the Master Emerald. It's like they only made them scatter because game accuracy, which was only out of obligation because they immediately started writing as if they hadn't written that. Sonic reassures Knuckles that he has a mission too, and tells him to take this, and with a squeezing of his fists, the green light shines to make a new Master Emerald. That was easy. It doesn't need to say that it shone brightly. He says if the forces of the Emeralds ever get out of control again, they'll need Knuckles to use this to restore balance. So it's nice of him to give him a purpose. It's new that Knuckles is only the Guardian because Sonic told him to be. After some padding, Sonic and Tails fist bump, and after some padded out hesitation, Knuckles joins in. And Tails gives him more exposition I already know without telling me why he stopped being injured already. It's so nice of Knuckles to hold back on his super strength so that he doesn't hurt them by fist bumping. And it goes back to padding for a while. Why would I think I'd care about Sonic commenting over a baseball game? A lot of this is just padding. It turns out this is a crazy special game because Tails and Knuckles are going to be playing despite not being professionals. So that's what the narration meant by exhibition game. Somehow Knuckles wonders what the ball did to deserve being attacked by a baseball bat, even though he knows it's an inanimate object. This is something Boom Knuckles would say. This is no better than him, and I bet most people overlooked it because it's framed as him saying it because he's a warrior. But I don't know enough about his past to know why in the world he doesn't know about the concept of sports. Even the ancient Aztecs had sports. They had an extremely difficult basketball. How is they hit a ball for a game impossible to understand? After failure, he asks why he should run at all if the goal is to get where he started. Again, an impossibly stupid question, because he knows he's playing a game, but at least it makes him sound like a philosopher who's overthinking it. I'd rather his stupid lines be because of that. There's a bunch of padding after this where he misses and eventually gets told to just give the ball a ride. And somehow he just asks where the ride would be to, even though he knows the ball would be too small and come at him too fast to ride. The writers just made him like early Antoine in personality, except not a coward. Eventually he punches a baseball, so it goes way too far, and it takes too long describing that. Wouldn't the ball get destroyed from the force of the punch? Must have been a futuristic ball. Unfortunately, Tom says that was their last ball, and Tails lampshades that it shouldn't count. But it's sweet to see Knuckles celebrating, though he doesn't phrase it like Knuckles would. Instead saying victory is mine like a villain, and then flexing, which is another thing Knuckles wouldn't do. And why would he when he's got nothing to show off? He's got the same noodle arms as the rest of them. By futuristic ball, I mean that Tails could have made it. After the narrator states the obvious, it says they got to have ice cream and stay up late for a movie and do it again tomorrow. Eventually Tom says he's happy for Sonic as they walk to the ice cream parlor. Why would they walk? This would be insanely boring for Sonic. Tom says Sonic's got the perfect wingman and the perfect friends, which is good because he's so happy about it he almost blushes. Then he shows a depth for once by wondering what other possible threats he'd have to face besides Eggman. After pointless narration, he says what he should know Tom already knows. It's not just his friends that make him happy, it's everything he's got here, and he calls him Dad. The narration says Donut Lord put his arm around Sonic, as I feel like it's only slightly heartwarming because I'm so distracted by the fact that it'd feel better if Tom was a hedgehog, especially if it was like Uncle Chuck. It'll always be weird because he's a human, so it's not getting the same vibe as it did in Archie, like the height difference. Also, the narration calling him Donut Lord is silly at a time like this. It's not as heartwarming as it would have been because it's not his name, and usually he's called Tom by the narration. It says they walked towards home, but at the start of the scene it said they were on their way to the ice cream parlor. So I thought they only left home to head for the parlor. But apparently they were only going there on the way home from some other place that for no reason he took Sonic with him to. I guess he loved the attention. Left alone on the baseball field, it's a sports cooler with drinks and ice and the Master Emerald in the center. It's great that Knuckles can just carry it everywhere in the cooler instead of not getting to have a life just because he's guarding the emerald. And it makes sense because he could shrink it around and carry it whenever he wanted at the end of SE2. The problem with the solution is that Eggman's gonna assume the emerald's in the cooler and try to go after it if he figures out he's never seen without it. And in an instant, Sonic gets to it to pick it up, saying that he can't forget this. Like he irresponsibly almost did because he wasn't used to it. I guess it makes sense that everyone forgot it from force of habit because they're used to leaving places without keeping it with them. And in a blue blur, it disappears as the story ends, while conveniently forgetting about the stolen $100 bills in Tom's house. You know, the marked banknotes. Since even Eggman can use Master Emerald. Longclaw was full of shit thinking only someone as powerful as Sonic would be able to harness its power by himself. Eggman was way more impressive with it. I mean, Eggman did something way more impressive looking with it, because it created something really big. We're supposed to believe that he's more powerful with it than Eggman was. It was never explicitly stated though. What he did wasn't as impressive because we already assumed that Eggman was invincible when he was super, and Eggman was also able to fly, and we already would have assumed that Eggman would have had super strength. So Sonic never did anything to prove that he was more powerful than Eggman was.